Okay, welcome everybody.
Hello.
Let's see. So, any announcements, anything that anybody wants to share that would be of interest for us to know? Okay.
Now, there's a train show in Hickory, North Carolina, but that's kind of far for you guys.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
Right here. Charlie's probably the closest one there, and that's not too
Mm.
close.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah, there is a train show in Amsterdam, New York, but I get the impression I'm probably the closest one there.
Oh, God.
Damn, New York. I don't even know where that is.
Amsterdam, New York, west of Schenectady.
Oh,
Okay.
whoa. Oh, that's out there. Oh, yeah. Right.
Just down the road, down the thruway, right?
Right. Well, gentlemen, thanks for joining us. This is going to be, informal because as much as or as little as I have to share, I thought it could provoke some interesting conversation. Let's see, I've got about maybe 8 slides, and this is just going to be on what we did on Saturday, of which 3 of the members on the Zoom right now participated.
Cool.
So let's see what we can get here. Whoop.
Starting with the end.
I know, man. It's sometimes it's the best way to start is from the back and then work your way forward. Let's see. There we go. How the hell? What the hell?
I like that.
There we go. There we go. So this has probably been maybe the 5th or 6th op session I've done over the years, and probably the first 3 were nothing but shakedown runs, where it was more about uncovering the glitches. And over time, and especially up to this one, I realized that you can't really wait to the last minute or roll the dice to see if the engines are running. So a couple of the guidelines that I've put together are broken down into the pre-ops and during the session and what have you. And this is clearly one of them for me, is to make sure that you're testing out the engines at least 3 or 4 days prior, because there have been breakdowns in the past. And I wanted to continue to fine tune the experience for the members, so they're not feeling like they're experiencing Groundhog Day. And then the one thing I wanted to do this time too was prepare a little bit more formal orientation. I would wing it in the past, and then after the group got going or the crews got going, I realized, damn, I forgot to say that or what have you. So I actually created a guideline or a list of things that I wanted to make sure that I pointed out. I'll share that with you in a minute. And then during the session, the first couple of times, I'd have people show up at around 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock, I forget. And then we would do a run, and we'd have lunch and come back and do another run. But a couple of things got in the way of that. One is, especially if there were glitches with track or what have you, people would, I think, this is my guess, I'd have to hear from others, that as much as they'd enjoy running it, the breakdowns would kind of get in the way. So we decided, or at least I decided, and with some guidance from a couple of the guys, 3 hours in the afternoon would be fine, and I love it when people are leaving or sending me notes after, where it's like you always want to have them leave wanting to come back. And so those comments are really encouraging, which gives me room to think broader about what's possible for operations. I clearly see that 6 or 7 is the max. I mean, I could do 8, we could do 4 crews, but it really, I think the experience starts to diminish because you've got people congregating in areas, especially if there's a delay for one locomotive or one train. So 6 to 7 is it. 3 crews, 2 each. And, Bill Myers gave me the idea of like, if there is a seventh, well, let them run a special. There's no switching. You just run it through as a priority train. So the fascinating element with that is any other trains on the line got to get out of the way. So it would be interesting to see what happens when we do that. I think we did it once, 2 sessions ago or 3, and it creates an interesting dynamic. I might have mentioned this last time, but one of the elements that I like to include are aspects of operating that would reflect prototype. And one of those is clearly pocket watches. So I take down the clocks, and the only way you know what time it is the conductor gets a pocket watch. And we synchronize them so that we start at 11, or no, yeah, on the watch it's 11, but I think real time is anywhere between 1 and 1:30. And that's how they manage their train orders and their schedules. And with that, I give them like 10 to 15 minutes on the front end to connect, decide who's going to do what, do a walkthrough. Because if you think about it, the operators at the time would know their runs. They would know the ins and outs of the different towns or the switching. So giving the crew some time on the front end at least allows them to connect and decide how they're going to play out maybe a couple of switching moves, and it refamiliarizes them with the layout and the track work and what have you. So I find that's a real attribute, is to give them that 10 to 15 minutes. One of the things I do is on the train order sheets, which I've yet to be able to figure out how to get into the PowerPoint. I don't know what's up with that. But below their schedule, there's a section where it's some space, of course, also in the schedule, whether it's the town, usually it's the timing in the town and if they're picking up or dropping off. And that's when I ask them to make any notations in there. So that way I can collect all those sheets at the end and see what needs to be addressed for the next time. And we find that, it's interesting. I think the runs go for maybe an hour. So they show up at 1, we do an orientation. By the time the trains get going, it's maybe 1:30. They run till 2:30 or 3. And the downtime, I think, is just about as much fun as it is running the trains, or maybe not quite as much. But I've seen where the spontaneous conversations occur. So I find it's really valuable to give some breathing room while the guys are here, versus it's just this regimented thing where you got to get on one train and get on another. But as people become more familiar, I think I'm going to add a couple of things to this. So with that, this was the orientation that I mapped out, and these were the fellas that were participating this time. A few of these guys in here, like Dan, Andy, and Bill. Some of you might have met Paul. He's been on a call once or twice. And Rob and Ed are from my Garden State Central Model Railroad Club, a local group. So when you think about orientation, there's the time before they even get there. Some things I want them to be thinking about. So for our home, my wife being from Hawaii, we're a no shoes house. So the shoes get left out in the porch. So I'm really clear with the guys, socks friendly. If you want, bring your own house slippers, and we got a basket. I encourage them to bring a vest. This way they've got pockets for all the different elements that they might be carrying around. And I remind them a heads up that's like from 1 to 4. And if there's anything else I need them to know, I like to make sure that they're coming prepared and ready. So once they show up, it's a welcome, do some introductions. And I'm finding that there's been such a repeat of the same operators that they're getting to know each other fairly well. Go over some housekeeping elements. And then this time, which I haven't done in the past, is to give a little broader context, like what's happening on the Western Atlantic Railroad in 1863. And this, I find, at least for me, it's important in the way that they can transport themselves into the experience of operating a train. If they think about, okay, this is happening, and this is why these trains are scheduled the way they are, why the consists are the way they are. And I think it gives a deeper, more three-dimensional, if you will, experience of the time together. Like I say, 2 or 1 man crews. They break up, decide who's going to work with each other, and then I give them the schedule options. Tell them, which trains are running from where to where, and they get to decide which ones they run. But most of the time they say, "You tell me which one you want me to run."
Yeah.
I say, "Okay, keep it simple." And then, so like they say, they choose the crew, they choose the route, or I choose the route, and then under the train order or the schedule, there's a bottom half. Oh, this is the last part. I also give them an update during the orientation of any layout updates or changes. So the 3-way, the good news is the Arduino's in, and it functions like a charm. My buddy was able to come here and program it so that the fly rails land directly across from the stock rails. It's sweet. But now I just got to have him come back and help me wire the damn thing, because I have no idea. And then the breakers are here. We just need to get that wired too. So I like to give them at least a heads up as to what's going on, if there's any other changes with the layout, any watch outs. So I mentioned that under the schedule, I have this key. And because some guys would ask me, so what is AT? Or because on the schedule, it just shows the destination as AT for Atlanta. So I decided to put this in to eliminate any guesswork. And the other thing I added this time was the throttle functions, because I know I've mentioned to people in the orientation what does what, but there's so much stuff to remember. I thought, let me keep it simple and put these in. Working with function mapping, I'm going to also add F5 for the grade crossing signal, which I think is too long, a short, and a long. And there's a few other functions I want to add here just to, again, enhance the experience of running in 1863. So these were the crews, for the most part. Where'd that go? Typical delay in Big Shanty or in Kingston. It's funny how it always plays out that way. And this is Rob and Andy in Chattanooga. I think they are just getting started. Yeah, I think they're just getting started on their run. Over
Yes.
here you have Dan and Ed. I have no idea what they're laughing about. I think Dan's
How pathetic we were.
I think Dan was grimacing, actually.
Dan was grimacing.
He was doing the Lincoln pin couplers.
Yeah, Dan was having trouble with the Lincoln pin in that.
Oh,
photo.
no.
Oh, got it. And that's a great cohort you got there who's laughing at you while you're struggling. That's great. And Rob Davis, little did I know, there's a few of us that have a specialty to good whiskey, and Rob brought this. It's called Uncle Ernest. It's made out of Shelbyville, Tennessee, and it is unbelievable. And the story behind it is, check me guys that heard it from Rob. Evidently, back in 1850s, there was a slave that was stilling some whiskey, and there was a fella that came along that was interested in doing the same and building a business. I believe that was his intention.
Yep.
So he hooked up with Uncle Ernest, and he showed this fella how to make whiskey. And you fast forward, and it turns out that gentleman was named Jack Daniels.
You got it.
I was like,
Yeah.
damn, wow, a great story. And that was a full bottle right there. And by the end of the night, it was empty. And afternoon, we didn't even get to the night. It was great. It's a great time. And as they say, what is that rule? Whatever that rule is, Dan?
Rule G.
Rule G, the stories are abound in different memoirs and such as to the fact that engineers, firemen, brakemen would all be, imbibing. So it's just another added element to the authenticity of the era that I thought would be cool to bring in. Let's see. I'm going to go down here. The reason I'm bringing this back up is there's a new element that I want to add into this. And this is something that was put in a while ago. Can you see the cursor over here?
Yeah.
So that's a tracks hidden staging area, and we've never used that. And that's something else that I want to bring into the experience. Plus, we have the interchange with the East Tennessee and Georgia.
Oh, yeah.
Going back to the hidden staging, that's where the MNC and the NNC are going to be bringing in trains. So that's going to be a cool element. Charlie gave me a heads up as to how Niter might have been shipped into Chattanooga. So that's going to be one of the trains. Another added element is going to be including more of the Atlanta and West Point cars. And I'm working on a new Mantua that I'm going to be decorating with these beautiful decals that John Ott did with this cool, like, it's not quite a powder blue, but it's a gorgeous blue. Well, and so I guess I'm saying all these things because there's a variety of possibilities. And I think I mentioned last time too that DC over here in Kennesaw built a cargo platform that hangs out over the tracks, and he's got a pulley system. And I think we included that in the last op session as a stop for one of the trains. So it's fascinating how it continues to evolve. Because you can have, I think we've already talked about this, so I don't want to belabor the point, but everything from hospital trains and troop trains to civilian trains and subsets of those. So, and then of course you have Rome, and I've built a few more cars for that as well. One of the things I've been contemplating over the years is how to build an
Yes.
extension on this. But I don't know. That's not even on the burner, let alone a back burner yet. But that's one of the things I'm looking forward to doing. And for the next visit, Bill, and I think whenever you get to it, whether it's during the week or on a weekend, I like to have a few guys come in, and we're going to do something called create your train run. Instead of me going through all these ideas, I thought it'd be fun to do a brainstorm with a couple of you, or leave you on your own and just write up what a train would look like and how you would process that through the layout, through a schedule. Because I've got so many ideas and I'm just inundated to the point where I'm paralyzed. So support would be welcome.
Okay.
So what, if anything, did we learn this time? Prior to an ops, do all repairs and apply lessons from the prior sessions. However, don't start any projects within electrical projects within 7 to 10 days. And I was within a hair's breadth to installing the circuit breakers 4 days before the session. And then fortunately a light bulb went on and said, nah, that's just a stupid idea. And risked killing the whole session. The other is to continue to invite a core group of operators. What I mean by core group is folks that have been here at least several times. It not only maximizes their capability and experience, but like I say, it also minimizes first-time pilot error. So I'd like to have like maybe 4 at least, or 5 regulars, if you will, and maybe a couple of new guys at some point. But it's always been so rewarding when fellas come back and they start meeting, different people, but have been here before, like Rob Davis and Andy Estep, who have never met each other. I think Rob was talking about, or Andy was talking about, some real car that's being refurbished. that Rob knew about, and boom, you've got what I call space docking. People that never met each other that, in space all of a sudden have a common interest. So it was very cool. I still like the fact that we can run at least 7 or 8 cars on the train versus only 3 or 4. I might push it to 10, but again, it depends on what's the rationale for the train and what its purpose is, what its run is. The other is to repeat 1 or 2 schedules instead of making up 4 different schedules every time. It allows the crews to operate prototypically in the sense of, just think about Fuller and Kane when they were running the general. It was the same routine every day. So although the different operators might be on that train from a modeling perspective, the schedule's the same. So I think it builds the experience of a prototypical line, and it also minimizes the dispatcher conundrums of trying to figure out 4 new freaking schedules. Yeah. Let's see what else. Beginning of a session, the orientation should repeat the basics. So although I've said these things probably every time, at least some of them, I find it's always valuable because, we don't meet maybe every like 6, 7, maybe 8 weeks. And it's easy to forget a lot of that stuff. So repetition is a good thing. And again, highlight the watch outs. Like what I found this last time, which I was so grateful of, the majority of the issues, of which I think there might have been 2, was pilot error. And what happens is, what I've seen, when he moves into a turnout or a turnout, because he wants to do something, he didn't realize that the fly rails are in the opposing position. So he thought as long as he didn't go up to those fly rails that were in the opposing position, there wouldn't be a problem. But he was shorting out every time. And so that was pointed out. Assuming that doesn't happen again, I think the railroad ran fairly flawlessly. I think some of the guys might need to remind me all that. But yeah, so that was some of the learnings from last time. And then what's the other? Oh yeah, down tracks, you might know, makes this current keeper, and it's long and narrow. And I was able to jam it into a Mantua tender versus the keep alive, because I like to experiment. I want to see how this is going to work. However, the K4s are still fantastic. I have not had any issues. And the other learning is to add incrementally other things to the train orders or the orientation, like the throttle use functions. And I'm thinking about adding something where the operators are using the bells and the whistle signals more consistently. But that's always been a secondary or back burner thing for me, because it's enough just to move the trains into the link and pin coupling. Yeah, so let's see. Oh yeah, here's a new one. I was talking to Bernie a couple of weeks ago, and he does this thing called random events. And what he does is he has these boxes with about 20 cards, and they're at different positions on the fascia. And he says, when you come to that position, you just got to pick a card and read the card. And I think I have a few examples here in a second. But I liked DC's suggestion. He says, give the cards out ahead of time to each crew. And then on the train order, you indicate when to read card number 1 and when to read card number 2. I thought that was kind of cool. And here's, oops, did we do it? Yeah, here's some random event possibilities. So you discover a hot journal box. So you got to stop for 10 minutes to let it cool. Ooh. Sparks from a locomotive set hay on fire. If your train has a forage car, stop to fight the fire. 15-minute delay. Now, of course, the times you can do whatever you want, but it's tough for me to fathom two fellas on a crew just sitting around for 15 minutes pretending that they're putting out a fire. I don't know. Yeah. And
That's
I'm
like
not,
the
sure as hell not gonna light a fire on the layout.
I guess
It's
that
like
would
the whiskey
depend on
order.
Uncle Ernest, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, that's why we're already putting, we gotta, I don't know. We'll talk about that offline. Let's see. If you hit cattle, you stop for 5, wait for the farmer and the superintendent. There's a washout or there's a delay ahead. And you have, you can have a scale figure and you got to put them 100 feet rear of the train. And then you wait for 3 minutes until you got a go ahead signal from the dispatcher. And, Bernie has all of these on his website under event possibilities. So if you're looking for nuances to add to an ops, there's some great suggestions on there that you can blend into your operating.
Hey, Tom, there
Yeah.
was one more that some of the cards would have on them, but there would be nothing wrong. You just proceed according to schedule. When you turned over the card, you wouldn't know which you were going to get though.
That's right. Yeah, there's some that are benign that don't interfere with your operation at all. Exactly. Yep. Cool. So, let's see. Stop that. Yeah, there you go. So that was our day on Saturday afternoon. I know I said I was going to have something with locomotive name boards. I haven't put that together yet, so I'll have that up for us for next time. Any questions or comments about an operating session or reactions to the boys that were here on Saturday?
Tom, I just wanted to reinforce how good it is that you're running mostly W&A engines at this point. Did we lose Tom?
Oh my gosh, now
I think we did.
Yeah.
Says Corey is our host now.
I am. All right, guys, welcome.
Thank you.
Oh, how quickly you can move up in the ranks.
I know.
Yeah,
Everybody's dropping out today.
And the next presentation will be,
Oh, I don't know.
Oh.
I don't have much to present about right now. My layout's
Oh.
3.5 hours away because I'm at school. So
Well, I was the question I had was with the hit cattle, what happens if you hit something that's not wildlife in itself? I'm assuming that would be shorter because, well, you wouldn't have to wait for a farmer.
Well, the times on the cards are
Oh, they're just made up.
you're not going to be waiting 15 minutes or
Gotcha.
to deal with a cow carcass is probably going to take more than 2 minutes type thing in reality, unless you just throw it over the side of the road fed.
Yeah, like the random events, all those times are random. I typically, even when I do water stops, I usually make it 1 minute. And what I found too over time is that the schedule was too tight. Sometimes I think, which was prototypical, crews weren't ending until maybe almost 45 minutes to an hour after they were supposed to be done. And what was great, I tell you, one of the other defining factors for the pleasurable experience is that people that show up here and the people I keep re-inviting really love the era. And I think that goes a long way to really getting into the nuances. So if there's delays, breakdowns, what have you, guys go with the flow for the most part. I have found though, when I've had a couple of members other than Ed and Rob, of course, come here that are used to doing like 1950s, boy, they get frustrated pretty quick. Like one guy actually said to me, I'm not making up a train. The train's supposed to be ready for me, so I can just take it out. I'm like, holy smokes. Okay, check that guy off the box.
I was after Sunday, Tom, I was at an open house, and that was pretty much what it was. They just run passenger trains from point A to point B.
You know what? I get it, you know, and I think because I've operated on some of those more quote unquote modern era layouts, and some of these guys are really buttoned down, and you're like running a real railroad. And they have I mean, it's pretty complex. You know, where I have two boxes, I have one that says drop off and the other one says pick up. And when you go to some of these layouts, they have like 8 boxes for different cars, and it's like, whoa, that's very sophisticated, very sophisticated. And I get it, but that's not my cup of tea. I love the era that we're in and the ambiguities and the spontaneities of it. And the guys really get into some great conversations, whether it's about the railroading or whatever they're into. And you know, and Dan, Bill weigh in. I think for the most part, people really enjoy it. And
Oh, yeah.
right,
It's great. I really enjoyed it. I think
Andy's here.
the stopping to refuel and water is, I mean, as part of your switching session really adds a lot to it. It makes you realize how much they would have had to be aware of how they're running on fuel and water.
Right. That's why, you know, there's function 9 on the throttle. You hit that, you hear the hatch open up, the water drop in, and then when you're done, you just hit the function button again. The water stops, the hatch closes. There's so many. When Bogatuk was here, he showed me how to do echoes on the bells, and so that you get that slight expansive feeling in the bell. For the most part, I've got different bells and whistles for the locomotive. So if you run the trains long enough, you'll hear the whistle, and you could know the locomotive that you're listening to. Yeah, it's too much fun. It's too much fun. I'm glad I haven't been working much in the last 3 months.
One thing I was wondering on the event elements, I mean, instead of a car, if it would work, I'd like just have some cows in your pocket, and every so often just put one on the track in the middle of the country.
That's a great idea. Yeah, I could. DC, you and I can have a couple of cows in our pockets, and before trade, just leave them on there.
I love that idea.
That's great. That's great, Walter. I'm noting that one, man. That's great. Jeez.
Of course, the next thing you're gonna have to do is have to get a damsel tied to the track.
No. But I was thinking, yeah, I mean, maybe there's prisoners that have to be transported.
Down branches, trees.
Yeah, a tree across the track.
Yep. Brush fires. Yeah, it's endless, the possibilities. And for those of you that are doing layouts like Charlie and Ron and DC and Roger and Paul, you know, the fun is just beginning. The fun is just beginning. It's just too cool. And it's so cool to have a repeat guests, so that you're you know, the learning curve exponentially, you know, increases, and people can get right into it.
One part of Americana I really enjoy about railroads from that time also, is there are a lot of times when they have a long run and we just stop in the middle of nowhere for the night. If it's near a farm and they'd see it, the farmers would put seed on the right of way. So when they'd stop, if it was the proper time of the year, then they could have fresh vegetables and so on for dinner. And then in the wintertime, the farmers that did that, the train would drop off a little bucket of coal at those places. So
That's
people
great.
helping each other out.
Yep. The other thing I remember reading in, it might have been Wiley Harbin's narrative, where I think it was on the General, where Kane had put a bucket on the end of the handrail, because they were supposed to meet up with the Catoosa or some other locomotive, because that person needed what was ever in the bucket. I don't know if it was grease or whatnot. So you can schedule it so that your intention, if you meet that train, you got a 2-minute delay, so that they can hand off whatever they need to hand off. I mean, it's just, I could do this every week.
You
But
know, one thing I was noticing on the layout, I mean, I had the same thing. I've always assumed that anytime you load or unload, you're on a siding or equivalent there, or a yard or something. But in modeling, we don't really have the room. And so on a main line, there'll be some place where we load or unload something, but I assume in real life that never happened. Has anyone ever heard?
whoa. Boy, that's a good question. I have no idea. Wow, Walter, that's a good one.
But on the M&C and the NNC, sometimes, I mean, if you block the main line, sometimes it might happen that train was too long or whatever, and that you would send flagmen both ways. Is that kind of what you're asking?
Well, if you're going to pick up or drop off at a main, what if the goods aren't there? It takes too long to load, something happens. I would think you would not want to block traffic. And anytime there's anything that gets unloaded or loaded, you'd be at a siding to do it. And but
Well,
we should have room in model railroading, from what I've seen, to do that all the time.
I think if it depends on what go ahead, Charlie.
Well, I don't have it in front of me, but that the Civil War bells and whistles, the copy that I gave you, Tom.
Yep.
So, I mean, they would use the bell sometimes to signal kind of a unofficial move. I mean, just occasionally they'd have to. And so they had provisions for, you know, the extra steps they would take, either with flagmen or ringing the bell, that sort of thing, which
I would
you
think
can
too.
duplicate.
Yeah, easily. If you are building a layout, again, it depends on what you want your layout to do. I think if you like rail fanning, where you like to just see the trains run through cool scenes, you're not thinking too much about an operations design. But if you are, I think, you know, a couple of passing tracks, a couple of sidings would be paramount if you want to do operations. Yeah, so that's really in the mind of the builder. You know, what do they want their railroad to do? I'll go back to that article I read in one of the early NMRA magazines. I think it was called Scale Rails at the time. And there was this fella that did he created a questionnaire for those who were considering building a railroad to help you think through what you wanted your railroad to do. And he came up with, there's three primary elements to the railroad. One is the engineer who's running his train. There's the dispatcher who likes to run multiple trains or see multiple trains running. And there's the rail fan, like I said, likes to see trains going through some cool scenes. So your total can be 66 points, if you will. And so after you complete the questionnaire, you tally up the results, and they're in those columns of engineer, dispatcher, and rail fan. And so out of 66 possible points, I had 22 in dispatcher, 22 in engineer, and 22 in rail fanning. So this doesn't help me at all. And then I realized, I guess I want to do a little bit of everything. So that played a significant role in my thought around how to design this so that I can include all of those elements. So if anybody's interested in that, I can send you a copy, and you can play with it and just do the questionnaire and see where your primary interest lies. Matter of fact, I think I'll do that. When I send out the recording, I'll put that as an attachment.
Cool.
And one question I had, if for anybody who know the engineering of it, I noticed by one roundhouse, and it looked like it's a bunch of rail facilities, you had a lard oil place. From an
Lard
engineer,
oil, yeah.
From an engineering perspective, what's the difference between lard oil, whale oil, and then petroleum?
Lard, well, my understanding with the lard oil factory in Atlanta, that's where they either they had the carcasses of cows and they did something with melting down the fat for the lard. I don't know about the other two. Well,
Well, whale oil comes from whales, obviously, and
Well,
petroleum comes out
from
of
an
the ground.
engineering point of view, last year whale oil was used a lot in lamps.
Right.
Lard oil, I think of as cooking or frying. But the fact that that processing, unless it was for shipping, what was used in the journal boxes? Did they ever use animal in journal boxes, for example? Or greasing or oiling the engines?
Well, tallow was used on the engines for the overall finish, and I think that's very similar to lard.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a fatty oleaginous substance like an ointment or so. I think whale oil originally was one of the only lubricants for the axle boxes before, you know, I'm talking back in the 1830s.
Yeah, okay.
Before petroleum, you know, came in starting in the 1860s and later. So I don't know. That's about the extent of my 2 cents on it.
And I've seen under cannons, I've seen tar buckets, which make no sense to me, but unless they have a different word for tar.
No, I think those are water buckets where you put the swab in and you swab it. That's to cool the barrel down. That's water to cool the barrel down and to extinguish any little bits of sparks that happen to be in the cannon, because you're going to put a charge in there. So you don't want any leftover sparks in the cannon barrel.
Mm.
They also had grease pots, unlike wagons and such. That's what you carried your grease for, to grease your axles and wheels.
Mhm.
Could lard be thick enough? You could use lard for that, for your wheels?
You could bring it, you had to kind of bring it down, but it was kind of thick. You kind of like you're painting it on. I mean, we had to make axle grease at Colonial Williamsburg for use there. And it was fun to play with. Had a unique smell to it at times, especially when it got hot. But yeah, it was relatively thick when you put it on with a stick.
Well, you've heard the phrase tallow pot before, right? The tallow pot had the tallow, which was the animal fat, and you would keep that pot near the back head of the engine and keep it warm so the stuff stayed liquid, and you'd use that for your greasing your rods, your rod bearings and your crosshead, stuff like that. John's shaking his head yes, so I guess I said the right thing there.
I'm used to seeing people those long oil cans, but that's all like modern stuff. So I don't know what they would do before. Yeah.
oh, so they would not have had oil cans in the 1863.
Nope, that came in with petroleum.
Okay.
Okay, I got to take the oil can off the locomotive that I got it on and put a bucket on it.
Well, bucket, yes, but
Buckets are actually a really good idea because they carried a hell of a lot of stuff in buckets.
They would have just been laid on the tender, or where were they hanging on the back of the tender, or?
They would have sat on top of the tender. They weren't going to go anywhere.
Right. Oh, that's great. Okay, I'll add that detail.
As long as you don't kick the bucket.
Yeah.
Quick question about operations. Are you able to recreate the Great Locomotive Chase?
Kind of. Yeah, I mean, there could be elements of it. It's funny too, of all the locomotives I do not have, it's the General and the Texas. I mean, I've got them, I just got to rebuild them. And you know what? I'm kind of bored with them. So that's why next time I'll talk about this one locomotive, the Mazeppa. that was on the WNA, and some other locomotives, because I'm looking for the majority of them to be from the Western Atlantic, and then I want one for the East Tennessee and Georgia, one for the Macon and Western, one for the Georgia Railroad. I think, if I could have one for each of the interchanges, even though they probably weren't on the WNA, it would be something to have. And I'm figuring, at some point, I'll be able to work some kind of deal out with LeBron and have his locomotive, his Texas in general, be transferred to the North Branch, and then I'll run a great locomotive chase kind of video. He's not on this call, is he? Good. I'm not going to send the recording to him.
Does he have a motorized Fuller?
Motorized what?
Fuller.
No. Fuller, as in like William? No. Motorized Fuller.
Yeah, running down the track.
Running down the track.
Oh. No. Where was I?
Got to have a modified Bachman gantry dancer with Fuller on the thing going like this.
There you go.
I don't think that they didn't have those then. It was a pole
It
car,
was
right,
pole
John?
car.
Full car.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yep. That or your feet. Yep. That was a modern invention that hadn't happened yet.
I
We
blame.
would get going pretty good with those pole cars.
I blame Buster Keaton on that one.
Right. I was at a club business meeting Tuesday night, and one of the guys had some interaction with Bernard from Mini Prince, and he pulled up Bernard's website, and Bernard has different figures that he used to advertise. And the fella says, "This is you, isn't it?" And I looked at it, I'm like, "I'll be damned, he's got my figure." So yeah, I think we missed the mark on that one, DC. We should be getting some kind of residuals from
Yeah,
that advertising.
You got it.
at least a few more free figures.
I'm going to ask him for a half dozen cannon, actually.
Whoa.
Oh, make that an even dozen. Give me 6.
Right, because he still uses yours too. That's right. Yep.
Yeah, he's got more of me.
Right. Right. Good.
But his
Anything
prints
else?
are really good.
Yeah. Good. Okay.
Well,
Now
I'm going to
what-
bring up
now what-
something about the operation that I found useful as an operator or as a conductor. The fact that this time there were a lot more Lincoln pins found in the yard that I didn't have to hunt them down. And if one dropped, I could find another one. Or if it was, there's some pins that are a little wide and some that are skinny pins.
Right.
So it was good to be able to switch a fat pin for a skinny pin.
Skinny pins are your friend.
Exactly.
Well, you can thank Bill Myers for that, because that came from a conversation. I don't know if it was on a Zoom or sitting here having a whiskey, but we were talking about where would they store the Lincoln pins. And Bill was saying, there were so many of them, chances are they'd be laying around all over the place. And I thought, you know what, that makes it so much easier for the guys, as opposed to like going into this little canister, trying to pick out a pin and link. They're just laying around, and it's again, I'm feeding the monster of a prototype, and looking for anything that could put you in the experience of being there then. So I love the suggestions and the ideas that come about to enhance the experience.
Well, thanks, Bill.
Right.
Who knew?
Right.
I've seen old photos with boxes of links and pins on the pilots of locomotives.
Really?
Mhm.
Okay, there we go. That's
That's
cool.
that's another thing you could put in buckets, leave on your tender too, depending on how much switching the engine did.
Right. That's a great idea.
You
Okay.
could even put a box of them in one of your box cars. Or just sitting there.
Or a platform car or a flat
Or
car.
platform, yeah.
Yeah.
You guys
Just
aren't
like-
using conductors cars, but yeah, they used to keep them in conductors cars too.
Cool.
My conductor's car does need more weight.
So you're gonna add a bucket of a lead bucket with lead linking pins in it?
I think I'm gonna put a box because I can get more in a box than I can in a bucket because these things are definitely not prototypical. They're pretty damn big.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think they're like got at least 2 feet long.
They're actually O scale,
Are they? Yeah.
yeah. Precision scale does make an HO scale linking pin coupler pocket. And I put them on some shorty flat cars and gongs. But they're more or less, you need to run them as unit trains. Because if you think your linking pins are difficult to do, those things, yeah, you make up a train, that train's gonna be there, same cars for life.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how I run my linking pins. They're just linked together, and I don't bother with unlinking them unless I want a really bad problem. I use the Grant Line links and pins that were designed for O scale 2-foot narrow gauge. They scale out to being real close to HO scale, but they're impossible to work with.
Oh,
I've got some tracks specifically for the purpose of linking pin couplers. They run right along the edge of the layout, so I can get in there with tweezers and whatever I need to work with them. At least that was what the idea was. But it's not a practical idea. I mean, you can never operate with them.
John, did you ever run an evening session where you just ran the headlights with some dim lights in the room?
Not yet. I've got to improve my room layout, lighting before I can get to that point.
Got it.
That's on the bucket list though.
Yeah, that's something I want to do too, is an evening run.
I mean, John, is there a video of your layout? I mean, I've been to your website, I don't know how many times, but is there a video just kind of showing the overall?
Not yet. Again, bucket list stuff. I always say I want to get the thing more completed before I show it off. But I've been saying that for 9 years now.
Oh, God. Okay.
Just take a video of what you want us to see.
Right. I'll do that one of these
Cool.
days.
Well, it seems that all the talk of buckets and all that, you sound like you might have your bucket list might have a lot of buckets in it.
Buckets and boxes.
Oh, that's true.
Here's a silly question. Pretty much about hats. What was I guess the progression of how, were there like a uniform hat or no? Like you get and now like I guess I'm not sure what thing, but you had the light blue and white stripes engineer's hat that I don't know when that became a thing, but I'm assuming not the 18th century.
I don't know when the typical, you know, well-known engineer's cap came into play, but I think when you look at photos from our era, these guys are wearing almost anything.
Yeah.
I don't think there were any uniforms in that period, really,
No,
for engine crew. There might have been for a conductor on a line like the Pennsylvania. But otherwise, I think engine crews just pretty much furnish their own. That's what they wore day to day.
It sure looks that way. You don't see any uniform, any kind of uniform. Sometimes you see the little badge on the hat, on the conductor's hat, a little metal badge with the chain. But nothing that looked like any engineer or conductor uniform.
right.
Now, I think the pillow ticking hats are pretty much 20th century.
Oh, yeah. Maybe even World War II or later.
Mhm.
I also have a question specifically with Pullman, which is slightly, from my understanding, it's just after the Civil War. But I was wondering, since during the Reconstruction era, there still wasn't a quote standard gauge at that point. Pullman also have narrow gauge and broad gauge sleeper cars.
Yeah. Definitely 3-foot gauge on the Colorado railroads. Yeah.
They didn't have a big presence in the South,
Right.
but there were other sleeping car companies that did service the South. They had 5-foot gauge cars.
Wagner.
Don't know about Wagner, but there was Woodruff and oh hell, I can't think of all the names. There were a bunch of minor companies that got absorbed by Pullman later on in the 80s.
Yeah, I've heard. I'm not quite sure how true this is, but from what I understand, before they had Pullman Green, they had Pullman Brown.
Ah, now you've opened a whole can of worms.
Oh, it's probably might get worse. From what I've heard, Pullman Brown is pretty much the same shade and color as UPS Brown.
That's often said.
Yes.
It's more like what UPS Brown used to be.
Ah, okay.
If you can go on the internet, you can find some pictures of old UPS trucks that have been put in museums. And they have a much darker shade of brown. It's almost black. It's just like a Brunswick brown.
Gotcha.
You have to have a real sharp light on it before you can actually see that it's brown. Otherwise, it looks black.
There's a whole in the early rail group IO session. There's a whole discussion on that you can join that group and take a look at it, and it goes on for comment after comment after comment.
Hey, I don't want everybody to think I'm a one-trick pony, but which railroad had the first sleeper cars?
I'll bet. It's a wild guess. I'm going out on the limb, but I'm going to say the Memphis and Charleston.
You got it exactly right. That's right.
I remember reading that.
Yeah, it was such a long railroad compared to others. But I don't have a single photo of an early sleeper car, but I'd love to find one.
Would that have been just a coach like a coach, or?
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, it probably was very much like a coach. There's some old diagrams in John White's book.
Yeah.
And it just looked like they were converted coach seats.
Okay.
So, you know, I suppose they look like just regular old Civil War style coaches with the arch roof. And, I don't know, 50 foot maybe.
Now, what year was that when they started the sleeper service?
I-
The question is, who started? Pullman started and a railroad started, or?
M&C.
Yeah,
Well, the
I
railroads-
don't know the answer on M&C.
The railroads all started at first. They experimented with sleepers. A lot of different railroads experimented with them long before Pullman got the idea.
Well, I believe Pullman was trying to make it like a hotel, if I remember correctly. It wasn't just a sleeper car. It had everything that a hotel would have, be a hotel on wheels. So it would have basically the kitchen, place to eat and stuff like that, or not just a plain sleeper, from my understanding.
Well, that came in about 20 years after the first Pullman sleepers, I think, the dining cars. They didn't
Well,
come in
as
until the late 1880s, early 1890s.
Well, as it happens, I've been researching the early Pullman company just over the last month. And a lot of what you read about it is hard to really document. But the story goes that 1857, 1858, something like that, George Pullman took a long overnight train trip across New York State. And the next morning, he felt so bad and got so little sleep, and it was rough and lousy and nothing was good about it. He decided that he could come up with a better way. So he got together with a business partner, and they approached the Chicago and Alton Railroad to get a couple of existing cars of some description converted to Pullman specification, which Pullman and his partner would then operate over the Alton Road. And that was, again, not necessarily the first sleeping car ever, but that was the first involvement of Pullman. And over the next 10 years, well, when you read about that, what I've read said these conversions were considered to be moderately successful or something like that. That was as good as they were, but it got Pullman, it got Pullman his start. And then he, over the next few years, acquired more cars, bought out other operators, bought them from railroads. And by 1860, I'm going by memory here, 1865 maybe, he had built his first sleeper. He didn't build it, he didn't have any facilities, but he had it built, and that's a car known as the Pioneer, which is pretty well known. And there's a photo that you always find if you Google it, showing it in much later years when it looks just like a sort of ordinary passenger coach. But as built, it would have had a elaborate broken bullnose style of roof, possibly 16 wheels, and been really fancy. The picture you see of it has a later bullnose roof, and it just sort of looks like a dumpy old coach. By 1868, I think, possibly 1867, Pullman dissolved and his partner split up, and that's when Pullman formed the Pullman's Palace Car Company. He had 37 cars. He owned 26 of them outright. He owned 7 of them in partnership with the Michigan Central and 4 of them in partnership with the Burlington. And the ones he owned in partnership with the railroads, he operated on those railroads and he had built in their shops. But he still didn't have any shops of his own. That happened around, he would get his cars built by railroads, or he'd buy existing cars, or he'd get them built by commercial builders. And one of the commercial builders that he used was called the Detroit Car and Manufacturing Company. And he wound up buying that around 1870. I found several different dates for it, but unable to really pin down what that happened, when that happened. So he bought that, and that became his manufacturing facility. And then in the early 1880s, he built a huge, hundreds of acre complex south of Chicago with the company town of Pullman and all that. And then he wound up closing the Detroit shop during the panic of 1893, when he also laid off most of his workforce, cut the wages of the rest of them, didn't cut their rents in the town of Pullman. And that resulted in the Pullman strike, when they called out the militia, and that was the end of that. So I've actually been researching Pullman's operation in Detroit over Christmas. When my kids were home for the holiday, we were driving around. I mean, I live in the Detroit area, driving around downtown, and my daughter said, well, a friend of mine just bought a condo downtown. I want to go see it. So she had an address, and we went to see it. And there it was, a new condo development. And the name of the development on the sign out in front of it was the Townhomes at Pullman Park. And I said, whoa, what's up with that? So I researched that, and sure enough, it's on the property that Pullman occupied in the 1870s, 80s, and 90s.
Wow.
And somehow somebody connected with this development researched that, found that out, named it that, which I thought was pretty cool.
Very cool.
But then I wonder if the, Gen Zs or millennials or whoever they are that are buying these condos have any idea even what a Pullman car is. I don't know.
I doubt it.
So there you go. There's early Pullman in a nutshell.
Very good. Very good. That's cool, John.
Well, I would have to say for a little bit later, after George Pullman, I think is the next president was Robert Todd Lincoln. And from my and the thing is that his summer home, the Hildene, is about 6 miles from my house, which is now a museum. Most of it, even though basically it was in the family until the last family member of the Lincolns was alive, which I believe was 76 or somewhere in the 70s. But then when the estate was going to sell it off and partition it like every other thing, basically what had happened is that all the well-to-do people in the area didn't want to see the complex be turned into another development, so they got their money together, bought the property, and they've slowly have restored it into sort of like a living museum, like it was back in 1905, complete with apparently it's the first house I've come across that has its own sound system. They actually have a player piano on steroids, basically. instead of, does have the piano portions, but it also is connected to an organ, which is up on the landing going up to the second floor. And it's loud. They actually have it operational. They have changed it into using digital instead of using the paper rolls, because the paper rolls are, they're over 100 years old. But they restored his Robert Lincoln's not only study, but also where the secretary was, and it was how it was hooked up to telephones and telegraphs and everything, that so it can conduct business in Vermont, controlling what was happening in Illinois. Unfortunately, most of the quote history that they have has to do with the building itself. Not necessarily with the family, but also with Abraham Lincoln. It seems that there's not that much there's not that much history about Robert Todd during this time and all that, which is sort of odd, but at the same time, he was overshadowed by both his father and his predecessor.
Right, yeah, Pullman died in the early 1890s, and that's when Robert Todd Lincoln, who had previously had a position with Pullman, took over as president. Pullman bought the Detroit Car and Manufacturing Company, which there isn't a lot of information that I've been able to find on that, but I did find a newspaper ad that ran in a lot of newspapers from sometime in 1865. Was placed by the U.S. military railroads, and it was offering for sale surplus equipment. And it was offering a group of flat cars, maybe it called them platform cars. I don't know, 50 of them, whatever they were, located in Detroit at the Detroit Car and Manufacturing Company to 5-foot gauge. So these were evidently surplus, not used. That's where they were when the war ended. They were being sold. And there was also a group of box cars, or maybe they called them house cars, at the Michigan Car Company, also located in Detroit, being offered for sale at the same time. Detroit was a big rail car manufacturing center in the late 1800s, and the military railroads had these orders of cars that I expect the war ended and suddenly became surplus to needs, and they were offering them, at auction, where they were, and ran the ads all over the country.
Now, question with the 5-foot gauge equipment. I want to say in that area it was standard gauge, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, but they were built for the military railroads that were operating, I think, primarily in the South. How they were going to get the cars down there, I don't know.
Yeah, I would assume the same way they would get, a narrow gauge car on flat cars. That would be my assumption.
Don't know.
Well, they also just put standard gauge trucks on them to take them to their destination.
Yeah, put their own trucks on the car itself. And
Put
standard
the
gauge trucks under, sure, they might have done that.
Put the 5-foot trucks on top,
Mhm,
lash them
mhm,
down.
mhm.
They did that a lot anyway. Whenever they had to transfer between gauges, they'd have yards full of extra trucks for that purpose.
Well, these cars were advertised for sale as being 5-foot gauge cars, so that's the trucks they must have had with them. I'll find that newspaper article and post it.
All right, gentlemen. Looks like we might be coming to the end of the line unless anybody has anything else you want to ask or share. Okay, well, great to see you all.
I thought I knew everything about Lincoln's family. I never knew he was connected to Pullman. So
Hmm,
great job.
Good.
Yeah,
Well,
Yeah. Great job.
the the Hildene Historical Society does have a website. So if you type in Hildene, you get on their website and then you can take a virtual tour. They do have a Pullman car on site. From my I think it's called the Sunbeam, and it's one of 6 that are survivors that are actually made of wood. They're not steel. So I think the car is. I've seen a couple of dates for it, but I have seen 1886 as the possible build date for it. And they have it actually set up where when they fully restored it, there's a section that they didn't resheathe the outside. So you actually see the internal bracings on it.
That's Haldane,
Hildene,
Hildene.
yes. Let's see, HILDENE, I believe.
Okay, I'll have to look for that.
Todd Lincoln's summer home. It's in Manchester, Vermont.
Okay,
I drive by it on my commute every day. But it's a very large place with a working sheep farm on it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I found it. I put in the chat, and this did someone else find it? Interesting.
oh, there it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, there it is.
Thanks, Vince.
I know you guys have amazed me. I never knew Lincoln's family had a connection to Pullman, and I never knew he had a connection to New Hampshire either. So you think of what's it, land of Lincoln is Illinois.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually trying to find out because he was in charge of Pullman. I was wondering if they were actually had a siding specifically for Lincoln, but from what I understand, he used the Pullman cars more like taxis, not a limo. So anytime he needed to move and all that, he would just send it, hey, send the closest one there, and he would get on it, and away he went.
Wow.
So he did not have a personal car.
Right. Fascinating. Great. Okay, we're good. Excellent. Thank you, Ed. Appreciate everybody's input, comments, conversation.
And good night, gentlemen.
You all be well. See you next time, we hope.
Don't run into any cows.
I'm keeping them in my pocket.